Imagine you're in a stadium, 50,000 people crammed together like sardines. The heat is suffocating, over 30 degrees Celsius inside a space without air conditioning. The smell is indescribable. Feces, sweat, blood, rotten food. There's no drinking water. There's not enough food. There are no functioning toilets. Children urinate on the floor. The elderly faint from thirst. And outside, the water has risen. The city is submerged. But the water, survivors say, was just the beginning. The real enemy was inside the Superdome. The real enemy was in Washington. The real enemy was the government that knew what was happening and waited. Welcome to New Orleans, 2005. Hurricane Katrina didn't kill 1,800 people. The water didn't kill. Indifference killed. New Orleans, August 29, 2005. Hurricane Katrina, one of the largest in United States history, struck the Gulf Coast with winds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour. But the destruction did not come from the wind. It came from the water. More than 50 levees and retaining walls failed, flooding 80% of the city. In some areas, the water reached 3 meters high. Approximately 134,000 homes were damaged or destroyed, 7 out of 10 occupied residences. The city that had survived everything was being devoured from within. But New Orleans was not caught by surprise. Meteorologists knew the hurricane was coming. The government knew the levees were fragile. Engineers had warned that a storm of that magnitude could destroy the city, and yet nothing was done. The levees were not reinforced. The evacuation plans were not updated. The poorest population, those without cars to escape, were left behind. The mandatory evacuation order was only given the day before the hurricane. For many, it was already too late. The levees failed not by chance, but due to unfortunate choices and decisions made over many years at almost every level of responsibility, according to a report by the American Society of Civil Engineers. The failure was human, and the tragedy that followed was inevitable. The New Orleans Superdome was supposed to be a shelter, the last-minute shelter, authorities said. About 10,000 people took refuge there before the storm. After the levees broke, that number rose to 25,000, at times reaching 30,000. But the Superdome was not prepared to receive so many people, and the authorities knew it. The stadium manager, Doug Thornton, had recommended, after Hurricane Georges in 1998, that the Superdome not be used as a shelter for anyone other than people with special needs. The recommendation was ignored. When the hurricane passed, the roof of the Superdome was torn in 2 places, opening up 6-meter holes. The electricity went out. The air conditioning stopped. The internal temperature rose to over 30 degrees. The humidity was stifling. Drinking water began to run out. The toilets overflowed. People began urinating and defecating in trash cans, in sinks, anywhere. The stench was so strong that many wore surgical masks to try to endure it. A 25-year-old evacuee, Taffany Smith, described the scene. "We urinate on the floor. We are like animals." She held her 3-week-old son, Terry, while carrying a bottle of formula. Baby supplies were running out. A mother said she received 2 diapers and was instructed to scrape them off when they got dirty and reuse them. The conditions were inhumane. Chaos ensued. Reports of violence were widespread. There were reports of rape, assault, and death. The Los Angeles Times reported that a child had been raped, along with accounts of other victims. One man jumped from a height of 15 meters, saying he had nothing left to live for. Another man was beaten to death by a mob that accused him of rape. The walls were stained with blood. There were crack cocaine vials on the ground. The place, once a symbol of civic pride, had turned into a hell. while survivors suffered inside the Superdome and the Convention Center, where another 20,000 people were crammed into equally precarious conditions. The federal government was slow to act. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, was overwhelmed and disorganized. Michael Brown, the agency's director, had no experience in emergency management. He admitted on national television that he did not know that thousands of survivors were in the convention center. President George W. Bush, at the time, was criticized for his slow response. It took days for supplies to arrive. It took days for evacuation buses to be sent. Critics pointed out that the federal government responded with armed troops to quell looting, instead of sending humanitarian aid. Louisiana Governor Kathleen Blanco mobilized the National Guard, stating that the soldiers, quote, know how to shoot and kill and are more than willing to do so if necessary. The message was clear. The priority was not saving lives, but restoring order. While FEMA struggled to coordinate the response, federal bureaucracy bogged down. Promised supplies did not arrive. Conflicting orders delayed the rescue. The lack of communication between the local, state, and federal levels was catastrophic. FEMA Director Michael Brown would later say that the government was not prepared for a catastrophe of that magnitude. But the truth is, they knew it could happen. The warnings were there. They were ignored. The official death toll from Hurricane Katrina is 1,836 people, but survivors say the water was just the beginning. Inside the Superdome, 6 people died during the days of chaos, 4 from natural causes, 1 from an overdose, and 1 by suicide. At the convention center, 4 bodies were recovered, including that of a homicide victim, but many believe the actual number of deaths was much higher. Bodies floated in the flooded streets. They were found in attics, on rooftops, abandoned on roadsides. The dead were mostly poor. They were mostly black. The racial and economic inequality of New Orleans was exposed by the tragedy. The city's population was 67% black at the time, and most of those trapped in the city lacked the resources to evacuate. They didn't have cars. They didn't have money for bus or plane tickets. They didn't have relatives in other cities to flee to. They were left behind. The government's inaction was not just negligence, it was a choice, and that choice came at a price. Professor Alessandra Jereleman, who lived in New Orleans when the hurricane hit the city, said, Katrina exposed the idea that, in an American city, people could get trapped, could run out of basic resources, and the federal government could be too slow and somehow unable to get people out. This revelation, according to her, was very shocking to many at the time. New Orleans rebuilt itself, slowly, painfully. The levees were reinforced, emergency plans were updated, FEMA underwent reforms. But the lessons of Katrina, experts warn, are being forgotten. 20 years later, the Federal Emergency Agency is once again under attack. Funding cuts, understaffing, and the appointment of unqualified leaders threaten to repeat the tragedy. In August 2025, more than 180 current and former FEMA employees published a letter warning that debilitating cuts to the agency could lead to a catastrophe similar to Hurricane Katrina. The next day, dozens of those who signed the letter were placed on administrative leave. The government, once again, seems to have learned the wrong lesson. The question remains, what happens when a system fails repeatedly? What happens when the victims are always the same? The poor, black people, the marginalized. In 2005, New Orleans was a warning. In 2026, it may be a warning of what is to come. The Superdome is still standing. The New Orleans Saints played there again. Tourists visit the city, listen to jazz, eat gumbo, ride in carriages. Most don't know what happened inside, or maybe they do, but prefer to forget. The toys on the ground in Pripyat are terrifying. The bones in the Superdome are invisible, but they are there. In the stories of the survivors, in the FEMA reports, in the bodies that were never counted. Hurricane Katrina didn't kill 1,800 people. The water didn't kill. Indifference killed. Racism killed. Bureaucracy killed. Negligence killed. The government knew what was happening, and it waited. It waited for the poor to die. It waited for the desperate to be forgotten. It waited for history to absolve them. And history, in fact, absolved them. Because history is written by the victors. And the victors, in 2005, weren't in New Orleans. They were in Washington, in air-conditioned offices, in meetings where they decided who deserved to be saved and who didn't. They decided the poor didn't deserve it. They decided black people didn't deserve it. They decided New Orleans didn't deserve it. But the survivors remember. The survivors tell the story. The survivors are still here. And as long as there is a survivor, the story will not be forgotten. The water wasn't the worst enemy. The worst enemy was the silence. The worst enemy was the waiting. The worst enemy was the government that knew and did nothing. New Orleans, 2005. The water that wasn't the worst enemy, and the government that waited